just about 7 o'clock, so I would like to welcome you. Welcome to the Monroe County Local History Room and Museum. And this is our second in a series of programs this winter and spring. We call it History Live because we talk about history, but history is about people doing things, and that's very much a living thing. And tonight we're excited about our program about hops growing then and now. But before we get it started with tonight's program, I'll just let you know that next month's program is about World War I. Now, I don't know if you knew this or not, but we are in the middle of celebrating the centennial of World War I. And so I would encourage you to come next month. We have, Ward Ziske will be coming dressed in a World War I uniform and bringing with him World War I gear and equipment and talking about the World War I and its lasting impact on the world. And then that's April 5th, by the way, is the first Thursday at 7 o'clock. And then May 10th, we have a brand new program. It's called Fires, Floods, and Freaks of Nature. And that's where we're going to be exploring 3 different disasters that occurred throughout the county. We have a fire, this was the Tacoma High School fire, and then a flood in Sparta in 1943. And then we have a cyclone in Kendall in the 1950s. So, thank you everyone again for coming out tonight, and we're really excited about this program. We never did anything like this before. But we have 2 different perspectives that will be shared tonight. We have Craig Saxe, and he's going to be here talking about first the history of hops growing in our area. And then we'll be talking to Jim and Bob Conant, and they're from the Tacoma area. They actually grow hops, and then they'll take over and share about how hops is grown today and how it's processed and so on. Then afterward, we will be providing some samples of beer, because you can't talk about beer and leave you thirsty like that. But our good friends at Sand Creek Brewing are here. Jay's over by the barn, and we'll be lining up and having some beer at the barn afterward. Okay, so thank you again. And I'm going to let Craig introduce himself, and I'm going to pass the phone to him. Thank you again, and help me welcome our guest speakers tonight.
Well, thank you.
There we go. And I'll dim the lights for us.
Thank you very much. Let's see if I can practice moving this forward and back. That works. Okay. Well, it's glad to be here. I'm very excited to be talking about history, because that's an area that I found, especially history of, in this case, hops, but things about agriculture. So I was the agricultural educator in Juneau County, and just a second. I'm taking that off because I can see all better without it. I can't read anything without it. But, so I was an agricultural educator in Juneau County. So that's when this slideshow evolved. And at that point, we did a history of the agriculture in Juneau County. And you'll notice it says in the area, Juneau County area. So this is a small piece of the whole slideshow that I used. The whole slideshow is like 200 slides. But I found as I was doing it, history is never just specific to Juneau County. It's specific to a region. So we have a lot of great things to talk about, and hops is one of those. I am now covering a 5-county area as a area extension director is the title. So I work for the University of Wisconsin Extension, and I'm the administrator supervisor over La Crosse, Monroe. I want to try to do it this way: La Crosse, Monroe, Vernon, Crawford, and Richland counties. Those are the 5 counties I cover. Oh, and that's up there. Anyhow. So, the core of the slides that I use are pictures, and the pictures tell the story. And I just think these pictures are so cool. So, take a look at the pictures up there as I'm talking about some of these pictures. And I like to use this slide as a starting point to talk about a work in progress. I'm always finding new stuff, and Jared, you shared some slides with me that I've added, but now I have some new slides to add. So that's fun, because history, I keep finding new things to put in. So it's always a work in progress when I look at this. This is a work crew, 2 different pictures, but these are work crews, 2 black and whites. Big Flats is Adams County, if you're not familiar with that area, and the bottom one is Mauston. Now, in the 1900s, the farmers would come together, they would appoint a roadmaster, and the roadmaster would be tasked to put roads together. So this was the highway department back in the 1900s. And the farmers used that to pay off their taxes. And the amount that they got deducted from their taxes determined it depended on how many people they brought, how many horses, how many shovels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see the horses and the people and the shovels. Now, if you're looking at that, on the top picture, who's the roadmaster? That's right. The guy without the shovel. See what the picture shows? It's worth 1,000 words. It just goes. The bottom picture, if you've ever been to Boston, that's the road that goes between Boston and Lisbon. So that road was built with horses and farmers building that road that follows the railroad tracks. Is there a pointer on it? Yeah. The lake that's in Boston, Lake Decorah, is right here. So that was built with horses. When I started this history gig, I was very much into researching, and I thought history was pretty cut and dry. I don't believe that anymore. You know, history is more about storytelling. And you pull different stories together, you get different ideas, and depending on what you read, you get a different story. So I'm here to tell you tonight, I'll give you as many facts as I can, but it's still my story. So somebody might refute this, and there might be a different story to tell by somebody else. But even that is some of the things I've read and the story I pulled together, I think will have some interest tonight. So Jared shared this picture with me, and it's back here. You have to make sure you take a look at that if you've not seen it before. A key picture of Sparta. And I was talking to a gentleman when I first came in. If you've never seen this picture, oh, by the way, I've got it blown up. This is even better. So this is Highway 27, right here. Isn't that a beautiful road? I've seen pictures like this before, didn't they? And this is, I think the gentleman told me this is Oak Street right here. That's like well maintained with a tree right in the middle of the road. That's the way they built the roads, isn't it? Now, so we've got Sparta, and of course, front and center is the hops. And by the way, that's why I'm here. I was staring at this picture. My first day here in Sparta, in my new position, Bill Halfman was touring and said, hey, we got to go over to the museum. And I was looking at this picture and we got talking. And Jerry said, hey, could you come and talk about hops? So that's how we got on this. But there's more to this picture than just hops. We're going to come back to the hops in Sparta a little later. But I just want to point that out. First of all, see the fence here? There's a picket fence here, and there's fences there, and there's, all these fences. What were they for? Keep what? Okay, so she said keep in the livestock. You got everything but the in correct. Keep out the livestock. In that day and age, everybody would have a few cows. Well, when they stopped milking, they just let them roam. Okay, go, bossy. When you have your calf in the spring again, we'll come find you and we'll milk you for a while till you're done milking, and then we'll let you go. So that day and age, the constables, the sheriffs probably spent more time getting the cows and the critters out of your yard than they really preferred to do. So all of these fences, they weren't just for cosmetic. They were to keep the neighbor's cattle out of your property. Now, if you're real up close, you can see the outhouse here, and the outhouse there, and the outhouse over here, and that was the city plumbing back in the 1800s. And the story goes on. If you were to stare at this for a while longer, you'd see other things. But of course, the hops are there too. So let's go back and talk about hops. My slideshow, the whole group starts by talking about the Native Americans that first came here. And of course, a lot of our history is written, so I don't have a lot about Native Americans, but this one picture relates to hops. This is the Decorah family, Strong's Prairie, again, that's just across the line from Necedah into Adams County. And this is a picture of them. And I'll give you a hint. This is going to be important later. Why the slide is in here, okay? Remember that as part of the picture. I might make sure I mention that later. This is a picture of Adams County in 1849. Now, I like this picture. I could tell a lot of other things not dealing with hops or Monroe County in this picture. But let's talk about some things about Monroe County, and I think I've got, yeah. So, that line I just incorporated is where the Monroe County line is right now. This is Juneau County today. Adams County is over here. Monroe County is over there. But in 1849, Adams County incorporated all of this. Also, in 1849, this was what was surveyed and platted. This was not. So this would be Indian territory. Wild country, Great Wild West, whatever you want to describe that. Boston, Monroe County were not a part of that. Okay. If you get a little idea about, the black dots represent the population. So here is Sparta, right there. So there's a nice black dot right there. So there's a little higher population spike there. This is Boston right there, and of course the cross right there. It gives you an idea that, pretty sparse population in northern Wisconsin. We've got heavier population down below. Now keep in mind this population when we come back to it, we're talking about hops, because it's kind of important too to bring that out. Sidebar, I won't know exactly which counties, but I think this might have been Chippewa County here, and maybe Iowa kind of down here. Well, my point is, Mackinac County would have been right across here. When the early settlers first came, it was one big territory, and they kept shaving it down. So when the settlers came in, Iowa County is down here. Iowa County originally would have been 1/4 of Wisconsin, and then all of a sudden it became here, and then it grew. So counties shrunk as the population moved north. Okay. Give you a little idea what was happening in this case, 1881. This is what was shipped out of Boston in 1881. So what's the king as far as a crop, as a production? In this area, it's wheat. Top one is flour, 1, 2, 3, fourth down is down here is wheat. Between those two, that was the king. In the 1800s, wheat was the producing crop that we had. And it was an easy crop to grow on new soil, virgin soil. It took a lot out of the soil. Eventually, the diseases and the insects came on, and it wasn't as productive. That was the moment in time where hops fit in the puzzle, the piece of the puzzle. We had all this wheat that people used to pay their taxes and get established, and they were using it as a cash crop, and all of a sudden they're saying, this isn't working out. What else can we grow? Oh, let's try hops. Now, eventually, we experimented into, and by the way, we were number 2 in wheat at that point in time. So wheat production was pretty big in Wisconsin in that time period. And we are now, of course, dairy. We went from that wheat state into this experimenting area into dairy. Now, there were other things we experimented with in that little window. I bet you can name a few, we still are doing today. They're very much niche products. Tobacco is one, absolutely. Was there another one I heard?
Hemp.
Hemp was another one, yes. Although that would have been a little later, but it was certainly one. Cranberries, thank you. I want to make sure we didn't forget the cranberries. So those are still important crops in this area, but this is also that time period where there was, I wonder if this will work for us too. The experimentation occurred. Oh, see, it's even on here in Juneau County. Cranberries towards the bottom. So, let's go to hops. There was the hop boom, you see, 1856 to 1869. That would be the hop craze. That was where most of the hops were grown here in Wisconsin. But of course, they started about the 1840s. They went into the early 1900s. But this is when they were really moving hot. If you're not familiar with hops, there's some samples up here, and I think Jim and Bob will share some of this later. And I've got some pictures of that, and they've got pictures of it too. So I'll let them kind of go through some of that when they bring that out. But hops is a vine, grows about 25 foot tall. Historically, they grew them up poles, and I'll show you later those poles. Nowadays, how do they do it these days? Strings, okay. They tied them up with strings. In the parades when I was growing up, I saw all these people on stilts, right? They had a practical purpose. How would you go up 20 feet on a pole in the hops and be able to tie those strings on the top of that pole? You had to learn somebody had to be on stilts to do that. There was a practical, just like the picket fences had a practical purpose. If we look at the hops, they started out, you can see the price here, in the 1860s, the price was, 15 cents. They spiked all the way up to the 60 cents range, and then they crashed down to about 3 cents. So if you're reading it here, prices rose from 5 cents to 50 cents or more. The largest crop valued at $2.5 million in 1867. Today that'd be worth about $30 million in today's dollar. Of course, it eventually dropped. It's this whole story about people got into hops. It might be a future slide, but let me spill the beans. New York was the hop growing center for a while. They had a great industry growing. Some people that had the know-how brought it here, experimented with it in the 1840s, and then New York got hit with a hop louse, a bug, a critter that pretty much wiped them out. And we were established, we were experimenting with it, Wisconsin, and including Sparta. We were in a position to take that on. So they took that on, but of course, what do you suppose happened right about here? What's that?
Bugs again.
The bugs didn't come till back, in Wisconsin the bugs didn't come till about here. Everybody got into it, so we overproduced, and guess what? New York figured out how to deal with their bug problem, so all of a sudden all their product came on board too, and we really overproduced. So this is not an unusual trend for any commodity. So the conversation is you can get rich quick. Well, maybe that's not quite true, but if there's this talk about how profitable this is, and maybe not any talk about how much hard work it is, so they can talk about how much work it is to grow hops. But we can easily talk ourselves into growing things, but we think we're going to get money and we're going to make it fast. And in some cases you can do that. But if we all do it, eventually we're going to be at the top and we're going to crash to the bottom. Here's another chart kind of showing that growth. So in the 1860s, and I have Juneau County with red dots because usually I show this in Juneau County, but I think this is Monroe County. Yeah, here. So Monroe County, you see Sauk County was the lead. So they were the major producer of hops, well into the 1870s. The spike for the other counties, Juneau and Monroe, didn't really start till about here, and went up. A lot of growth. I was going to add, if you were to draw, there's a picture I'll show later, but Kilbourne, the town of Kilbourne was identified as the hop growing mecca of Wisconsin. At least that's what they bragged about. Kilbourne is now known as Wisconsin Dells. And if you draw a radius around that, you'll catch part of Juneau County and part of Adams County and part of, so you get the idea that a lot of things were growing. Now, why Kilbourne? Why did Kilbourne talk about this being the #1 crop? What was the key to any product being marketed? Transportation. And I think that's something we don't want to forget. When I think about agriculture comes hand in, it connects with some kind of infrastructure. Even today, there's areas of the world that actually could produce better crops than the United States can. But they don't have the infrastructure that we have here. And as much as we talk about the hops going up and going, pew, you could probably argue that that growth in hops produced the culture and the atmosphere and the ability for us to be resilient enough to be growing and doing what we're doing today. Yes, everybody went bankrupt and a lot of people went out of business and they had to sell those fancy horses and those houses and everything that they made their money on, but we learned something and we grew from that. So that was a good starting point from us in Wisconsin as an agricultural standpoint. Okay. So, Sparta. Here's some numbers that Jared shared with me. In 1869, Sparta produced 145,000 pounds of hops. Mr. Palmer there, he grew 40,000 pounds on 50 acres, valued at $4,694. To put this in perspective a little bit, at that point in time, hops or wheat would sell, you could make about $100 an acre on wheat. You could make $250 to $500 an acre growing hops. You see that it's kind of a no-brainer. Oh, look at this. I'm not making any money on wheat anymore. Let's try this hops thing because it could be. And I didn't tell you this. It takes about 3 years. Does that sound about right? You're saying 4 now? 4 years to get a good crop established. Hops are a perennial. They die back to the ground every year, and then they start those vines up every year, and you start it over, and you keep doing that year after year. So they'll probably last 20 years?
Indefinitely.
Yeah, indefinitely.
There's hops growing wild everywhere.
Yeah. And in fact, the hops I brought are growing wild at the Historical Society house in Boston. I've been watching those for years now. I just go out there and pick a few. And I don't know if they're really native to this area, but once they were brought in, they grow very nicely in the wild. So you'll find them in the wild. And I didn't say this earlier, so I'm curious. Hops, those are the cones, right? That's the right term?
Flower.
The flower. So that's the female part. There are male and female plants. So it's the female plants that you're growing. And all the history stuff I read said you'd have a couple of male plants to sustain the crop. Is that still the case?
You don't want a male plant.
Don't want a male plant at all anymore.
We kill them.
Okay, so you killed the male. Okay.
Male plant, you kill it.
Okay, that's not good for.
Up your varieties very fast.
Yeah, but it's the female plant that we want to get the crop. Yeah. Okay, so you notice by 1887 there were no hops here, so gone. In that Hop Mecca, Kilbourne area, they hung out to the mid-1900s or early 1900s, and that's when the hop loss, the bug came and then pretty much wiped them out. But you saw the 60 cents climb. At that point in time, the break even was about 10 cents, 10 to 15 cents a pound. And the people that were well established and whatever they did to do it right, they were able to make a profit at that, but most were not. This is in 1879. Give you some little dots. You can see that we had quite a hop mecca right through here. And I mentioned New York. That was the big hop producing area. And of course there was some scattered ones in California and up there in Washington and Idaho. And I thought ahead, let me just move, yeah, there. Today I've been told Washington, Oregon, and Idaho are the leading states. Hops are making a reinsurgence, and I'm sure they'll tell you this.
Michigan's number 4 now.
Michigan's number 4. Wow. We have a lot of niche breweries, don't we, Jay, over there? Yeah. Who would like to say that the hops are locally grown and they're providing, you know, that connection. So I think that's a good niche for some of our new hop producers and for some of those breweries that are out there. In this day and age, in the 1870s, I read someplace like 4 out of 5 communities had a brewery. So there was also this hope that we'd sell our hops locally. But if you notice, that kind of follows what I would call the main rail that probably went through there at that day and age. They had to be connected to that transportation arm to be able to move those hops around. This is a historical marker in Linden Station. Let me just read a couple of things. If you're up close, you can catch it yourself. But it says, let's see, when hops were selling for 50 cents a pound, workers in the field, merchants were selling silks, merchants were selling silks, laces, paisley shawls, grand pianos, and farmers were building new and larger homes and driving carriages drawn by expensive horses, as blooded horses up there. I think you get the point. If you got lots of money, you start spending the money. So it was good for the economy. But of course, when the crash came, then people went bankrupt and we went the other way. But once you put the building up, it stayed around for a while. Here's the hop harvest. And I'm going to take a side. Jay and I were talking earlier. I want to make sure I mention this. Hops are used for what this day and age? Beer. To flavor the beer, right? Hops has one close relative. Marijuana. That's its closest relative. Both of them have a sedative, is that the right word? Effect. But hops gives that bitter flavor to beer. But prior to, hops were grown way back into Rome. You can find it talked about in the Roman time period. And then it was used for dye. You could make yellow dye out of the leaves and the stems, I believe. And the hops itself, the cones, would be put into pillows, and you lay on the pillow to kind of soothe whatever it might be, a toothache or something else like that. So it had those medicinal purposes way back then. It wasn't really used for beer until, I don't know, 1500s? I don't have the exact number in my head, which, ask me later, Laura Payne put together a really nice article on history of hops. If that really interests you, I'll show you the article that she's got. The Historical Society's got that. Maybe you even have a sample here, but it's an excellent summary of the hops in Wisconsin. So this is the hops harvest, some pictures. Well, actually, I've got Laura Payne's name right here to recognize that was one of hers. You can see the long poles. You can see the long poles, and you saw that in the Sparta picture too. So did you make the connection that the Native Americans in that one picture were harvesting poles and selling the poles to the white man that was putting up the hops? Now, the hop production was very much a social connection. In the case that we just talked about, the Native Americans, the Decorah family, working with those that were growing hops because they were making some money off that. It was good for them. But also, notice this. In 1868, hops needed 70,000 women and children. So these are some pictures of those women and children to actually harvest those cones. Does it take that many today?
Well, you wish you had that many.
It's labor intensive. We'll let them talk about that. Lots of women and children. And they got there by the train. So we're back to how did they get there? Well, there had to be some transportation mechanism to get them to the hop fields to be able to do that harvesting.
Where did they stay?
And they would stay probably, even the cranberries, if you've read the history of cranberries, it's the same thing. They come in tents, they'd actually build houses where people would stay and live there while they're doing the harvesting. And they were migrant type workers, so they might go to one hop field and harvest all these and then go to the next one and harvest all those. So there'd be this process that they'd be harvesting the hops throughout That's a good question. And by the way, any other questions, feel free to jump in and share a question or ask a question.
They lowered the poles like that to harvest, so
Yep.
it's easy.
They would actually cut the poles down. So these guys would cut the poles down. The men, you notice that here's all the women. They're doing all the harvesting, women, but the men would cut the poles down and lay them across those.
We were told that the women would come in from like Minneapolis area and come down, and they'd have huge parties, and that's where the hop, the dance, the hop, that's where that came from. And
That one I hadn't heard.
huge harvest parties.
And this same kind of story goes for cranberries. People get together, it's a social opportunity. If you spend all day doing all that, doing a little dancing at night, the hop is probably, and you got all these young kids out there too that probably would enjoy some of that kind of thing. So it all fits in to our culture. Think about that and how that built our culture, in this case Sparta, but in Wisconsin as well. Okay. Hop house, there's just a couple more slides and then I'm going to turn it over to these guys. So the hops, one of the most expensive parts for hops, and I'm guessing it still is today, is the processing once you harvest them. So they're, this day, they were harvested, they were put into 2-story houses of some type, and there'd be a floor that would have slats in it, and a canvas typically, and they lay the hops out on the top. On the bottom they'd have a stove, a wood stove going, and that's what this is, the chimney out there, and they would heat those. So it was a big furnace that would heat those hops and dry them out. Now you can imagine that cost a lot of money to build those. So somebody that had made some money on hops, likely a big hop grower, would do that, and then he'd rent it out to everybody else that was interested in getting their hops dried the same way. Oh, that was my last slide. This is always my favorite one. If you don't know, I've forgotten his name all of a sudden. Hank Kimball from Green Acres, the county agent in Hank. I have a friend that's what he'd always call me, is Hank. And on the left is just the mission. So any other questions about hops before I turn it over to today? Because I want to hear what's going on today in hop production. Yes?
Part of the increase in the hop production was probably when the men came back from the Civil War. We had more workers, more men willing to try a new job, new trade.
Thank you for bringing that up. I meant to mention that. So if you didn't also notice, that was the transition between wheat and dairy, but it was also the middle of the Civil War. So early in the Civil War, it would have been likely that there weren't a lot of men around to do the harvesting, but towards the end of that hop production, then there were men around. So that would have also been an opportunity to get into hops because you came back from the war and let's try growing some hops. So the Civil War was a factor in that too.
That might have been why you had 70,000 women there too during
Yes.
that time, because they needed to make money and their husbands were gone.
Yep. Now let's see. Let's back up. So this is 1868. The Civil War ended. What year, Jay? We were talking about that. 65. So it was a little bit after this 70,000,
But there was a lot of widows.
oh, a lot of widows.
that need to make money.
There's a good point.
And orphans.
And orphans. So that was a part of this too. It's just amazing how this history all ties together. Anyway, that's off on a different tangent. Anything else? Any other questions, comments, observations? I actually learn more from the crowd sometimes than I share.
What else do they use hops for besides flavoring beer? Was there other applications?
At this point, I do not know what other uses for
We'll
hops.
talk about it.
Yeah, they've got some ideas. Good. And most beer is flavored with hops, but not all beer. And I don't know if you'll be talking about that. Yeah. Good. Any other comments before I pass it over? Well, thank you.
We'll just control that. So you have to advance.
It's
Once it gets
above there, forward and back. And the pointer is in the garage.
And the mic is on. I'm Jim Conant from Bohica Hops in Toma. And this is my brother Bob. We started our hop yard in 2010, so we've got around eight or nine growing seasons now under our belt. And it's a challenging thing, and If you guys want to try it, feel free, but I'm telling you, if I had to go back and do it again, it might not be a Bohica hops.
I think we average about 40 hours a
Back one
piece
slide.
out there every day,
Yeah.
or every week, each.
All right, we set. Now this will control that, or
I can help you with that.
all right.
In March, we started.
Yeah, all right. With the sign back, if I flip back, will it go back to the sign? All right.
All right.
All right. That's our logo. It's on the front of our farm. Like I said, we started this farm in 2010. Our mother passed away in 2009, and we sold her place. And my brother said, we ought to get together and do something, and just kind of do something together and build a farm. And I had no intentions really of getting into that. At the time, I'm a honeybee keeper, and I was a cranberry grower once, and I also work at the VA in Toma. And because of the honeybees and I had so much honey, I didn't know what to do with it all, so I made a little wine, and then I started brewing a little beer. And I told Bob that he had a greenhouse, and he has a green thumb. He would grow tomato plants and pepper plants for everybody in the area. I said, hey, how about this spring, could you get me just a couple of hop rhizomes, which is just a little stick that will root and grow into hops. And he's like, well, they won't grow in this area. That's how much we knew about hops then. They won't grow here. He said, it's the wrong climate. And I said, well, I'll put them on the south side of my house, but he's my big brother, so I kind of took a beating. A couple weeks later, I was looking in the lacrosse paper, and there was a full-page article that said, looking for hop growers in this area. And of course, now I got this paper. I walked over and, hey, read this. He opens it up. He said, I might be studying this, and he carries it into the house. And a couple days later, he calls me up and says, hey, he said, I signed us up for that course. We're going to go see about this hop growing thing. And that kind of started. I set up 2 rhizomes. That spring, we bought 1,200. And so Bohica Hop started.
Told him he could pick whatever 2 he wanted.
Every acre of hops takes we call an acre of hops 1,200 plants. Some people say an acre of hops is 1,000 plants. But we started out, we had to make a hop yard, and this is kind of a picture of the hop yard. And dandelions are in full bloom. It's actually mostly clover, and when we mow it down, it looks beautiful, and the dandelions come out in the spring, and I am a honeybee keeper, so we kind of let the flowers stay there, and it is. What you're seeing is our poles up, and in the last presentation, they used the poles to hold the hops up. We use strings. We have cables across the top of a trellis, and we hang strings down to each plant. It's kind of hard to see, but that green stuff you see down each row are the hop plants coming up. When they first come up, they look like asparagus plants, and then they slowly unfurl their leaves, and they look for something to climb on. And if you don't have something for them to climb on, they'll twist themselves up, and they'll go all the way across the row. They grow really fast. So the goal is get out there, get the strings up as soon as you possibly can. And of course, this was in our first year. We planted our little sticks, and we were fertilizing them, and we put up our strings, and we didn't know what to expect, but we were told if you're going to plant an acre of hops, you want to plant at least 3 varieties, because some hops will mature early, some will mature in the middle of the year, and some are middle of the season, I guess, and then some will mature late. And what I mean by that is early August, mid-August, 1st of September. He talked about picking hops with all the people coming out to pick them. You only have, for any variety, about 10 days to get all the hops picked, because they go from being too immature to be considered ripe to being overripe in about a 10-day period. So it all has to happen really quick. And of course, we didn't have any equipment, so we went out there. We grew these plants, and they grew actually really nice. I mean, the first year, like he said, it takes 3 or 4 years to get a good crop. But the first year, we had lots of hops. We thought there were lots of hops, but they weigh up kind of like feathers. It takes a lot of hops to make a pound. And of course, our plan was that we would get our friends out here at hop harvest time. We'd pick a third of an acre one weekend, a third of the acre the next weekend, a third of the acre the following weekend. And so the first weekend, come on, free beer, we're all going to pick, we're going to cook food, we're going to have fun picking hops. And I think we had like almost 30 people there, and we went through the third of an acre and just knocked it out, picking them by hand. And everybody had fun. The next week we called back and we had about 15 people showed up. And by the third weekend it was just my brother and me and our wives. It takes a lot longer to pick a third of an acre like that. So we had to come up with this invention. How are we going to pick these hops? We always thought the hard part would be growing the hops, but actually the hard part, and we'll talk about that later, is actually marketing the hops. You want to grow something that people want. We were kind of told what plants to put in because we signed on with the people that we had went to the lecture with, and we became hop growers for them. So they would market the hops. All we had to do was get the hops to them. So this first year we picked, and they said anybody that could get 100 pounds of hops on an acre was doing exceptionally well. And Bob and I are the only ones that ever did. And we did 128 pounds on our first year. But we knew after that it was going to be impossible to pick the hops by hand every year. If the first year plant, we could do what we had, how are we going to pick the second year plant? So I come up with this idea to build a machine in my garage that would possibly pick some hops. And Bob and I worked on this machine. This is it in action the second season. Now, it's kind of hard to see what's going on, but this red box up here we actually purchased, and that looks like kind of like a chicken plucker. It's got fingers in there. We would take the plant, we'd cut it down out in the hop field, and we'd cut it into about 4-foot sections, and we'd feed it into that machine up there, and the arms would come around and rip all the leaves off, and it would rip all the hop cones off. And then they would go into this drum, which the drum would rotate, kind of like a lottery wheel thing or something, and the hop cones would fall through the mesh, and the goal was to have the leaves fall out the end on that piece of tin. You can see a couple cones coming down the belt there. It's kind of like a thresher. A lot of leaves came out of the hole also, and they fall onto the belt. So underneath this belt, what you can't see is there's a big barn fan that's pulling a vacuum on that belt, and that belt is actually going upwards. So the hop cones would tumble down and fall into the bin where these two guys are sitting, and they'd pick out any leaves that came there. But the leaves would get sucked right to that belt because it's a porous belt, and then they would carry over the top and drop out the other side. And it was ingenious because we have our acre, our 1,200 plants, and with this machine, we on our best day, only once probably that it ever happened, but on our best day, we could pick about 300 plants in a day. And there's another picture of some people sitting underneath it. And I think there's another picture. I have just a lot of pictures to show you guys, but
Do those guys still get beer?
We learned to wait till the end of the day.
yeah, beer waited to the end. But yeah, we still try to keep them in beer, or we'd never have any help. There's Bob's wife out in the back. She's actually taking the bines. You remember they're 20 feet long, so you couldn't stand up there and feed that red. You couldn't feed them in at 20 feet long, so you'd have to cut them into like 4-foot sections and just kind of chicken pluck all the hops off and then throw that one out and get the next one. And it's a long day. And so after I think we did this for 2 years. Now we're into like our third, or maybe our fourth growing season, and our wives came to us and said, "We're not using that machine again." It took the third year. I want to say it took us working. We worked full-time jobs, but every evening and every weekend, and it was well into September before we finished everything. And I think we even ended up throwing some of our acre away because we just couldn't get them all off, even using that machine. And so we were at a point where we had to say, either we're going to do this, or we're going to get out. And of course, Bob and I, we don't quit things very easy. So I got a hold of a guy out in California, and I said, can you make us a hop picking machine that would pick hops? He says, well, how much you got? I said, well, we got an acre. He's like, I don't make nothing that small. You know, they're all 1,000-acre places. He said, but I get over to Germany quite a bit, and I can find you an old machine that they use in Germany. And I said, well, keep your eyes out, and if you can find us something, we'd be interested. And there's a picture. This platform here, my slides are a little bit out of order. We have 3 platforms. So there's one guy can stand up there, one guy can stand here, and one guy can stand down on the bottom. And that would be how we handpicked the first years. We would ride this. Somebody would pick from the ground, and then we'd put people on the platform. So the plant would stay standing, and we would just pick all the hops off it. We actually use this twice, because in the spring we're putting strings up here. This isn't picking the hops off, but this would be when we're putting the strings on. You gotta have somebody way up to tie the knot, and that's usually me. And then Bob's the guy that puts the string on the bottom. Right now we tie around 8,500 strings a year, and it's getting ready to start here in just a couple more weeks. So if anybody wants to tie strings. This is another method. When we would first started doing this, we would cut vines off. I would be up in the wagon, or we'd be hand picking. You see, these got bins up there, and we would be just picking hops from the top up there, and then we'd let other people pick the bottom stuff when we come through with that wagon. And there's some more hand picking, just walking down the road picking hops. This is again like the early years.
Them are 2-year-old plants.
You can kind of see the cones on them. The pictures aren't the best, but we're barely farmers, let alone photographers. So, lost my sound. I broke your machine. Too loud. Probably. Am I too loud? I can just talk to. But so what happened was, the guy from California produced the machine. He found it in a barn. This machine was made in 1971, and it's called a Wolf Picker. And they sent it here by ship from Hamburg, Germany. It came to New York City, and they put it on a train, and the train took it into Minneapolis. And in Minneapolis, they put it on this semi and brought it to our farm. And we opened up the back of this thing. I should have showed you more pictures of it, but there was just piles of junk in there. Apparently, a wolf picker won't fit in a shipping container, so they had to cut it into pieces. It didn't come with an instruction manual. So that whole summer, we were putting together hops. We also had to, we had to figure out how to assemble this. There was just piles of chain, and then they all fit once we figured out where they went. But it took us a while to figure it out. This is actually the top part of the machine. I got a couple pictures of it here to show you. This is another piece of it that was inside there. This is actually the main part of the machine, and then there was just a whole bunch of little pieces that went with it. We pulled it out. We had to rent a lift. This machine it's 26 feet long, it's 6 feet wide, and it stands just over 12 feet tall. So it's
10,000 pounds.
It's pretty heavy. Here we are maneuvering the top half to put it on.
You built the house around?
Yeah, we were building a building, but it got cold out and the builders quit on us. So it sat like that over winter, but the machine came in the middle of winter, so we still had to figure out how to get it in there. But yeah, this building is mostly this machine. There you can just see, you just figure out where the chains have to go on all the pulleys. And now, if you guys get a chance to come over in August, we call her Gertrude. That's her name. She's a German girl. But if you come over in August, you'll see how she works, and it's amazing. And there I was welding the top half on, and there we're sliding her into the building, and we still had just tons of accessories to mount on it. It took all summer to get it together. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. So anyhow, this method here, a lot better method of picking hops. The Germans had something going, and this is, like I said, this is the 1971 model. This is a Wolf 140, they call it, because it will pick 140 plants an hour. All right. We were picking 300 on our best day. Still make Wolf machines today. They make Wolf 1000s and bigger than that. So it's pretty amazing. It's all pretty much the same concept. It strips all the plant off, and then it puts it through a series of sorters that sort out the leaves and the stems, and what you get out the side is hops, and all the other stuff goes the other direction. And we'll show you a little bit of that. I don't have a super lot of that. This is you can see we got the strings tied now. This is spring. We did some tilling. This is some new plants that we had put in. You can see them coming up. They just come up and they go absolutely crazy. You tie a string like that. We were tying strings on the irrigation line originally. That black line you see right there, that's irrigation. We have a timer system so that each plant gets watered every day, and it's a dripper, so it drips right on the plant. Hops can't handle mildew very well, so you got to keep them dry. But really, this irrigation line is only a foot or so off the ground, so most of the plant is kept dry when it grows up. Each plant there's a dripper for each plant, and each plant in the hot summer day will get about 2 gallons of water apiece. So they drink. They're thirsty.
That plant will grow in June 3 to 4 feet a week.
Yeah, this picture like this is probably early May, 1st of May. By June 1st, we're all the way up to the top. The first plants are hitting the top of the trellis.
You have the string coming down. Do the plants automatically grasp for that?
No, they don't. And so if there's any volunteers that want to come out and train plants too,
the plant will follow the sun. And if we go out and we'll stick the runners on the bottom of the string, and we'll turn it so that it's the direction the sun goes, and then they got it. But if you put them on backwards, they'll fall off. They won't.
They'll only climb one way, and you get to see that all the time. When people come out and try to help you, they always do it wrong, and you can see you're looking at them, but you don't want to say nothing because they're working hard. But the other thing is, you can see how much plant material there is here. Optimally, you want 3 or 4 uprights to climb the string. The rest of them you don't want. If you put too much up, you're going to get too much canopy, and it'll look like a jungle, but you won't produce hops. You only want 3 or 4 maximum to actually go up. So you got these guys, and they're coming up and going crazy, and they're tangling themselves. They want to climb, so they'll actually twist around each other, and it just makes a total mess. So we try to get everything strung. When we start stringing, there's usually snow on the ground, and when we finish stringing, there's plants up 6 to 8 inches already, and then we go right from stringing into training, and we try to do a couple rows a night where we just get on our hands and knees and go down the length of the field, and he takes a row and I take a row, and we put 3 or 4 on the string, and we try to race through the yard. We don't give them any fertilizer until they're trained, because if you fertilize them before that, you're just asking for trouble. They will go absolutely crazy. So we're not feeding them until they're on the string. And then when we do get them on the string, it's usually around the 1st of May. We start feeding them, so we'll feed them the goal is to have the first fertilizer on by May 15th, and then about 14 days later we'll fertilize them again, and then by June 15th we've got the last shot of fertilizer on, and then we don't touch them anymore, and they're already up to the top of the trellis.
Part of what happens to hops in Wisconsin, you were talking about it, downy mildew wiped out most of it. No, I'll stop. And then the other part of it was they take up so much water and so much nutrient, they were depleting the soils. The soils were pretty much destroyed. We got commercial fertilizers now, so it fixes that problem. But the plant would actually take up so much.
What do you do with the extras if you only take 3 per string?
If you cut the tip off of that plant, if you cut him off, he's done. The plant will continue to shoot up new ones. They come up like asparagus, so if you cut them off, they just keep sending another one up. But the goal is to get them first 3 or 4 on the string and climbing. When they get into the rapid expansion phase, once we hit them with fertilizer, then they go up so fast that there will always be a jungle at the bottom. But what actually climbs to the top your flowering plants are gonna be,
And that doesn't grow all over the place.
No.
well, it
mow
tries.
the-
It tries. We
we
mow
mow
the
the
centers and
centers.
we mow over them.
Another thing we do is, before these plants get to the leaves open out, they come up out of the ground and they look like asparagus. And we've got a market for
Yeah.
these.
Someone said, what else do you use hops for? But they use these in restaurants when they look like asparagus.
Yeah.
We usually, they say that the first flush that comes up is not the ones that you want to put on the string. So typically when they first come up, we'll go out and we'll cut everything off, or try to, and let the next ones come up, because their first shoots that come out of the ground are typically the ones that are going to contain your downy mildew spores or something like that. So we will always cut off the first couple flushes that come out of the ground. And of them, normally we'll sort out like 8 or 10 inch shoots, and we have a couple people that market them, buy them by the pound from us. So you bundle them just like asparagus, and then the restaurants cook with them. It's a hop shoots. I don't know
Get
if you've
down
ever
around
seen that.
Madison or Minneapolis, somewhere like that. They're in the restaurants. They're really a delicacy, kind of a spicy,
Yeah.
kind of a spicy taste.
If you're out there long enough, you'll eat one just to try it. They're kind of spicy.
Didn't do nothing to me.
Here the plants are. This would be the start of the rapid expansion. We're hitting them with fertilizer now. When we first started out, we would, I think it looks like you could even maybe see fertilizer along the edge of that. But we would take our buckets out. We'd put a bucket on each end. We'd weigh it out. Each row of our hops are 330 feet long, and we would put about I want to say 15 pounds in a bucket on one end and 15 pounds in a bucket on the other, and we'd grab one bucket and walk, just pitch the fertilizer on them down one end. When you get the other, you'd have to set the empty bucket down and walk back with the other full bucket on the other side of the same row, so that each row would get 30 pounds.
That was 3 times.
We'd have to do that 3 times, but it would makes a long day. But we'd normally we'd put nitrogen on, and we'd come back and put our potash on, we came. I didn't bring a picture of it, but we went up to one of these cranberry guys and said, "Hey, I used to grow cranberries. I know you can blow fertilizer out on a cranberry bed way across. So why don't we make a machine that we can blow fertilizer on the hops? We just drive the tractor and not be walking like this." So it took a couple of years for them to get it the way we wanted it, but then now we have actually a machine that we do pull behind the tractor, and it meters out the fertilizer, and so the 3 applications of fertilizer got a lot easier. But this is the start. You can see how green it is on the bottom, and then they shoot up to the top pretty quick. You can see here this is actually a part of our yard that we had added on. You can see the older hops in the back, right in the back, and then this is just newer hops. And like I said, I just have a whole bunch of pictures that we threw in here to show you. This would be they're all the way up the top of the trellis. This would be spraying a fungicide. Bob just took a picture of us coming through with the sprayer. You have to use like a mist blower to cover all the leaves, because the fungus is everywhere. And the goal is to keep it off the cones, keep the hop cones good.
That's 15 feet between the rows. You're wondering.
There you can see. It's actually really cool when they're up like that. It's like a big tunnel. When we're at the back of the yard and you look towards Bob's house, it's when we're putting strings up, it's there. And then when this green wall comes up, pretty soon you're out there and the whole farm's just disappeared. All you see is hops. And there you can see how dense they get. And sometimes I wonder if the tractor's going to fit down through there, but I seem to always make it. And there's hops getting ready to pick. You can see how they've put hop cones on now from top to bottom. This is a Cascade plant, and Cascade's a real common hop. Everybody around here seems to grow Cascades, and they've done well for us. But again, it's not how good they grow for you; it's how good they sell for you. And sometimes selling Cascade hops is a problem. And so this gets us closer to our harvest time, but you can see I just took a bunch of pictures because they look really cool. There's some hop cones. I think I'm actually attacking some thistles right there, but because thistles, that's a problem. Anything else, but the thistles come up, and the things that kill thistles typically can kill a hop. So it's hard to kill plants like thistle. But we try. Bob and I pull them out and cut them down and do whatever we can to take care of them. There's Bob. There's some hop. Just again, this is just right before harvest, just to show you how. Just imagine yourself out there picking this by hand. Imagine them people back in the day bringing them plants down and then sitting there and pulling them off. The first year, you could take a plant, it would take us 15, 20 minutes to take them off by hand on one plant. When we got into the second and third year and we started using that other machine, everybody's saying, this machine's great. We don't have to do that. Look how many hops there are. Now when you get into the fourth and fifth years, you look at that and you say, I don't even want to attempt it. There's just that many hops on there.
It takes one person at least 45 minutes to pick a plant like that by hand.
So I'm up on the top of the tractor. We're riding around looking, trying to determine whether the hops are ripe or not. That's what's really taking place here. We go out and we collect the sample of hops. The easiest way we found to find out if they're ripe is the moisture content. Just like any other crop, as the crop starts to get ripe, it dries down. Typically, hops, when you harvest them, are somewhere around 80% moisture. So if we take a sample of these hops, we take them in and we put them on a paper plate and we weigh it. And then we put it in a microwave and we microwave it for about 30 seconds at a time, over and over and over and over, until they stop losing weight. So then we know what they weighed when they were wet, and now we know what they weigh when they're dry, and then we can determine what the percent of moisture we took out is. When we start getting into that magic area, that's when we say it's time and we go, and then we don't stop. We just go through it, because the hops we have now, even with our wolf picker, we're always chasing. I call it chasing the brown. If the hops only have 10 days to get them off, so the first ones we take off are beautiful. By the time we're getting done with that variety, they're already starting to go, and we're jumping right into the next variety to keep ahead of it. So this would be right before harvest. And there's a picture that's inverted, so I'm doing pretty good. And there I'm pulling some hops off. It's the start of the harvest. We made this, I kind of joked with Bob because he started making that a couple of years ago. I called it Noah's Ark because it looked like he was building a boat to go somewhere. But we put it on a tractor platform, or on a gravity box frame this year, bolted it down, and we thought, well, we'll try this, because we used to go out with a tractor and just harvest the hops on the front of the tractor and pull in a bucket load. And I got a picture somewhere in here of that too, but this was typically in Germany they have big metal wagons, and they'll have a guy sit up high and they'll cut the hops off on the bottom. We use a hedge trimmer, just walk down the row and cut them off. And then the guy up on top, which is me there, he would have a cutter, or in out west they actually have automatic machines that just go and cut the string off the top of the cable, and the hops fall into a wagon like this, and then they take it up to the machine and feed the machine. This is our old method. This is the tractor. We would have a guy sitting up there cutting plants and pulling them in. So the arc was actually a good invention, because we could go one post length. This would be one post length of hops, which is 50 feet on one of these. And when we use the arc to go out, we can take a whole row. So it's quite an improvement. Of course, the women don't think so, because when we're out cutting them off, the machine is stopped and they're on break. Now, we keep them busy. So here the plants are. You can see them coming into the machine again. Seems like I'm always up on top. This was right at the end of harvest. You can start to see the cones are starting to turn brown. And actually, this last year, the state was in doing some studies, and we had called them and told them we had already picked the variety, but they didn't have time to come out at that time to pick them. So when they got there to take their samples, it was a few days after we were actually done. So this was picking the hops that were left when, you know, they're going to do it again this year, but they're doing some fertilizer studies on our farm. And this was just to clean up the yard at the end. This was a wedding. I don't know, maybe give you some ideas. This was a really beautiful place to have a wedding. We did this a couple years ago. That's my daughter. She was married on our hop yard. Married a guy from Minnesota, though, so.
You know I'll ship him back.
Yeah. I have to hear all the Viking stuff now. So this is the wolf.
See how Jim's arms are, he's got like a sock rolled up. One thing you were talking about hops being related to marijuana, they're also in the nettle family. And they're extremely hard on your skin. I mean, Jim breaks out in blisters.
I get blisters on my arm, so I cut a hole in a pair of socks and I always slide a sock up on my arm. It's always 80 degrees and we're out there trying to do this.
Another thing about hops, you talking about the pillow. The pillow was for people that couldn't sleep. And the hops are loaded with estrogen. And you get around them and your face will just turn bright red and you'll get really hot and it's really weird. But if you want to fall asleep, you just work around it.
And when you're talking about throwing that big party at the end of the day when you're working on hops, I can tell you, at the end of the day, after you breathed in the dust from this stuff and then you've been around it all day long, you just want to go home and go to sleep. That's how you feel. It's really good for that. So that would be the arc load coming in, and we have this platform set in front of the picker. Some wolf pickers have an arm that comes down, and you can just stand there and put the vine on the machine. Ours, they actually hook the plant up above your head, and so we have to have the plants. The bottom of the plant goes in the machine, so there's less hops there. The top of the plant is all bushy, so when the arc comes in, all the bottoms are right here in the front. So I just grab them off of there and just put the bottom in the machine, and there's a hook that comes and grabs them and takes and pulls it into the machine. And that hook on ours right now comes around every 28 seconds. So you got 28 seconds to get a plant in there, and then get over there and get another one ripped out of the arc, and then get over and put it up. This is during harvest. You can see we usually cut with a hedge trimmer, so we leave 4 or 5 feet of hops sticking there, because hops don't tend to grow all the way to the ground as far as the cones, but the cones are mostly up high. 80% of your hops are in the top 20% of the plant. So down low you'll have a couple hops, but not very many. We cut them off there mainly so that after they're cut off in August, they still have a couple months before frost, and we want them to take in all the energy they can from the sun. So if you cut them off right at the ground, right now, you would be essentially ending the growing season. By taking them off high, we continue the growing season for a couple months and let them store stuff. We had a test plot once. The first year, we planted some plants in a couple rows. We actually hung them underneath the clothesline, which we got in a little trouble for that too. But, we thought, well, that's a perfect place. You got 4 lines. We can just hang little strings and we'll have the hops grow up there. Well, then the plan was to take them hops and dig them up the next year and move them. And so we got out the shovels and we thought, we're going to pick these whole plants. And we plant this little stick. It's called a rhizome. And it's got a couple little buds sticking out of it. The next spring, we go out and we go to cut this out. And pretty soon we've got a hole dug about 4 feet in a circle. And the roots are going deeper and deeper and deeper. And they have these huge tuber roots on them that look like sweet potatoes sticking out, and they must just be stored energy that the plant put away. But you would need to dig a 4 to 6 foot circle and go down 6 feet to pull that what was the year before a little stick and get him out of the ground. It was amazing, and we had 60 of them or something like that. It didn't look like a place to hang clothes when we were done. So that's just a picture, but it looked cool. Yeah. And there's another load on the arc, and you know, all I really have for you is I can show you me feeding them. This is what the hops look like as they're going into the picker. Yeah, I thought I had all these straightened out, but there's some beautiful hops going into the picture. When they come up on the platform and there's our kind of our setup, that big machine's inside there, and there it is. The plants come in. The rail comes there. I hook the plant on that rail. If you can see a little farther down, I'm probably hooking the plant on there, and then it pulls up into this top part. And the top section of that machine has got 5 drums with 10 sets of picking fingers, and the drums are just spinning really fast. And actually, the plant goes between the drums. So there's a drum on top and there's a drum on the bottom, and the plant's being pulled through by this chain that it's hooked to, and it pulls it through there, and then drums strip everything off of it. So when it comes out the other side, it just looks like a bare plant. There's just little stems. And then the rest of the machine, it uses 2 big blowers, just like my machine did originally, to create a vacuum. All the hops drop. They come through a series of conveyor belts, and they drop right across the front here, and that's where the big fan is. And any leaves that are in there get sucked to that leaf or to that belt, and that belt goes to a trash conveyor out the back, and they just disappear. The hop cones fall right through to the bottom, and there's another conveyor that takes them over to the people that are sorting, which is right there. You can see the. We still have a few friends. Yeah.
Are the cones hard or soft?
They're soft. They're soft. We have some here. We'll pass some hops around. You can smell them and
You can,
Yeah.
they're really light. You can open the bag and take a whiff of them.
here's some pelletized hops too, and you can just take and open them up.
These
and
are real little ones.
Smell them
They're
and
old.
If you want to pass
them around.
my pictures around, that might be good. Your cones are better than mine, but those pictures might be.
This is actually just some trash binds that we picked up. If you want to see those also, you can take one out of there. You can see the string that it was hanging on originally, and
So the string goes through the machine?
the string goes through the machine. The string is made out of coconut. We've tried baler twine. That's a no-no. Baler twine is not like coconut. Coconut chops up and goes out just like an organic thing. Baler twine just winds around everything. So we buy coconut string.
Question. That first bag I looked at looked like a cone, and these look like
These,
pellets.
those are pellets, yeah. And the first ones are cones.
We-
The goal of most brewers, you take those cones and,
This is what Sand
they,
Creek would use.
and
right
they
here.
grind them into pellets.
What do you do with this when you're, with all this stuff from you?
There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it. And what happens is at the back of this machine, the cones come out here to these bins. All that trash goes into the back, and there's a big chopper, and it chops it up into tiny little pieces. And then there's a silo blower that blows it out in a big pile. And then the pile, since it's mostly nitrogen, gets really hot really fast. We've had some people want to get some to mix with oak leaves and stuff out of their lawn to break them down. But what Bob and I do is we wait a couple months until the pile cools down a little bit, and then we spread it back on the hop yard as a mulch. But it's ground up. I'll show you a picture. I believe I have one of them of the trash. This was back in our old days when we used the thing that you put in the 4-foot section and it would strip the stuff off. This would be the leaves and crap coming out that little drum that we had, and this would be hand picking. So that we'd give this to the women and say, "Can you please take all the cones out of that?"
So
This-
where do these pellets come from?
Okay, the pellets. When Bob and I harvest the hops, they're wet. We have to dry them. Hops have to dry fairly quick, and I've got some pictures coming up of our dryers. When the hops are dried, we take them down to 10% moisture. Remember, I told you they're about 80%. So out of every 10 pounds of hops, 8 pounds of it is water, and that water's got to come out. So we get them dried down, then we put them through a baling process, and we make about between 100 and 150 pound bales out of it, and then we take it to our processor, who runs them through a hammer mill, and he does all the chemical testing on them, and then he'll put them into them. He'll make pellets like that. He'll pelletize them, because the brewer, if you were to take a 4-foot pile of hops here in a 10-foot square, you might have 100 pounds of hops. And a brewer putting them into his kettle can't use hops like that, and not as easily as he could a pelletized form, because you can grind all them hops up, and each one of them little bags that I passed out, that's 1 ounce. So it would take 16 bags like that to make a pound, where a pound of hops, I've taken people come out to the farm and want to buy a pound of hops, and I've taken a Walmart bag and stuffed as many as I possibly could into a Walmart bag, tied it off, and it's just about a pound. So
A gunny sack full of hops is about 10 pounds.
yeah, if you pack them into a gunny,
Feed bag.
a 100-pound feed sack, as tight as you can get them, you'll have 4 or 5 pounds probably.
So they use the whole cone.
It's the whole cone.
Whole cone.
It's the whole-
It dry.
The whole cone's dried, and inside the cone, if you look at those cones that he passed around, if you were to look inside them, there's a yellow resin in there.
Try to
That's
see
the
at the bottom of
lupulin.
that bag.
What the brewer is interested in is the acid content and the oil content in there, and them yellow glands are lupulin glands, and that's where that stuff is stored. So, and that's the stuff that makes you go to sleep. So there was my daughter getting married again in the hop yard. And we had a beer in their honor, of course. Which you can tell that's them in the hop yard. So, showing off my daughter, I guess. So this is our dryer. It's kind of a bad picture. What we do is I bought a big fan. Oh, we bought it because it was his money too. I found it at Seven River Surplus over in Minnesota. It looked brand spanking new. It's a huge air handling fan. We brought it in here. We made this this plenum so that the airflow, when we turn this fan on, it pulls air down through the hops. Because if they're so light, if you blew the air the other way, it looked like you were popping popcorn. So we suck it. We just suck. We have an insulated room, and we pull the air down through the hops, and we just let it keep going until they're dry. Now, of course, there's so much water in there that it'll take a long time. So what we do is, at first, we open the doors to the outside where it's usually like 50% humidity. So you can take the hops down to 50% moisture just using outside air to circulate through. And then after that, we close it up, and we have a couple big dehumidifiers that will turn on, and they'll just be running a steady stream of water to the drain. And then we test them using the microwave method until we get down to our 10%, and then we shut it off, we let them rest for a while, and then we bail them.
That's called the blue room, by the way.
Yeah.
It's green.
Yeah, Bob has little color problems. There you can see there's a few brown cones in there, but there's we have these bins. These bins all have a 1/4-inch hardware cloth bottom, and we bought stacking bins, so we've actually had bins stacked all the way up to the ceiling in there, and we can have a couple 100 pounds of dry hops real easy.
That's probably 100 pounds of hops. Roughly.
Yeah.
So how many days is this drying process?
Drying process for us takes around 30 hours.
We're not using heat. Your bigger ones, or a lot of the people are using heat, and they can get that down to 7.
Yeah, when they use the fire, like in the old days with this thing, they could do it in 6 or 7 hours. They would just build a fire underneath there. But what they came out with, and more recently, there's a lot of studies showing that the hotter that you heat the hops up to, the more of the good stuff is gone.
The oils disappear.
So the goal is to dry without heat. Yeah.
So are you only drying what has been picked, or is there an on-deck circle for all the wet hops? Do they mold?
They're put on the dryer.
As we pick a bin full, the dryer's sitting there running, and we load the dryer as we're picking, so it's going right on the dryer. At the end of the day, what we have. That dryer gets closed up. We have, Bob and I have built 2 of these, so the next day we're picking into the next dryer, and then on the third day, we're up late at night baling hops, so that we have another dryer that we can use the next day, and that's how it works then. The rest of the hop season, when everybody goes home at the end of the day, Bob and I go bale hops and get ready for the next day.
They'll be up to, them are 2 foot by 4 foot, each one of them, and we'll have 70 of them on there at the end of the day. We can draw air good through about 70 of them.
And of course, the rainy day we don't pick. Yes.
Okay, you were talking earlier about the male plant.
Right.
What if you do have male plants mixed with female?
What happens, and we've had that, and what the problem is, if you're buying a true plant like a Cascade or a Nugget, or a Mount Hood or something like that, and you have a male plant in your centennials, one male plant can pollinate the whole acre. So when the hop cone gets pollinated, instead of making all the lupulin that the brewer really wants, you'll get some lupulin, but you'll also get little seed pods, and you'll open the cone up and there'll be a lot of seed pods. If those seeds were to fall onto the ground, you could develop a new variety of hops that would be with the same strain that you're trying to grow. So you could actually change your variety that
And
way.
it also affects the oil in a cone. A bread, we call it bread, a plant that's pollinated, the oil levels will be different.
Yeah.
So and when the brewer wants that, they want to know that that cascade is a cascade and it's got to fall in a certain oil level and a
And
certain
an
acid
level,
level.
yeah.
And if it doesn't, it's no good to them because it won't make the beer taste and
Yeah, that's
bitter
why
that they want.
Miller always tastes like Miller.
Yeah.
So do you have to worry about wild varieties that might be nearby?
None.
We do, but we don't really have any wild varieties there other than ones that we've actually messed around with. If we see a male, we usually kill it. Male plants come up just like the females, and you don't know it's a male really until the flowering time. And it's strange. We call these the flowers on the hops, but if you saw the male plant, he actually gets the prettiest yellow flowers. They almost look like lilacs. It'll just be, and if you just shake it a little bit, just the dust, the pollen just falls off it. So it seems kind of backwards. It seems like that would be the female, and these would be the males. But the male plant gets these really yellow flowers. And
You can have a female plant that gets stressed, and it'll be like a hermaphrodite, but they will also be able to breed, so them have to be taken out.
every year we walk through and look for males.
It's just you two guys who run the show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have to learn a lot of science? Because it sounds like you're testing your pods for oil on a regular basis.
Well, we have a middleman. We get them to market, and then the middle guy, we bale them. We haul them to the middle guy. The middle guy does the analysis and the pelletizing,
And
then the marketing, the distributing. So we don't really want to be the distributor, and I don't know if in the future maybe we might look at more of that. But the big thing, if you were going to do this, the best thing to do would be have a brewery that would say, "Hey, if you could grow me 500 pounds of this, I'd buy it every year," and then you could just have a deal like that.
One of the biggest problems with Wisconsin right now, craft market. The hop market was really strong when Jim and I started. Really good money. But what's happened in Wisconsin is out west, all the hop varieties are protected. The main ones so we can't get our hands on them. So everybody in Wisconsin is growing Cascade, Nugget, Mount Hood, and we've all got the same hop. And what's happened now, there's so many people growing them that the market's flooded, and I've got the same hops Jim's got, and we're having problems with that. There are hops being developed now, and Michigan is a big one. And Minnesota, they've come out with some of their own varieties with different taste and aroma, and getting on the proprietary hops is big. And like for us, we've got one now, and
Kind of. He's not really. He's just it's a USDA released hop that we've been growing for a couple of years now called Cashmere, but not a lot of it is out there. So it's the first year we had the Cashmere hops, we were selling them for $40 a pound, which
a
is
normal
crazy.
hop right now is selling for $5 to $8.
About $5 a pound.
And then 8 years ago, they were $10 to $12 a pound. So it's about half.
How large are your bales, and how far away do you have to transport them?
Our bales are about 2 foot by 2 foot square, and then about 4 foot high, and they'll weigh up. The biggest one I made was like almost 160 pounds, about 160 pounds. But I don't like to make them that big because then it gets hard to carry them. So we shoot for 100 pounds.
And then how do you transport them? I mean, how far do you have
We
to-
store them while we store them in a dehumidified garage, basically. We keep the temperature as low as we possibly can in there because you want to keep them cool, because the hotter they are, the more faster they'll oxidize and you'll lose the compounds, and that's part of the reason you bale it, because when it's baled and compressed really tight, there isn't much oxygen inside there, so they tend to keep better. And then we get them to market as soon as we can, usually with a stock trailer. We'll have a buddy that comes down and we'll load them all on, our whole crop on his trailer, and we'll take them up
Wisconsin Rapids.
Right now, we're hauling. We market through Tenacious Badger Hops. They're located in Wisconsin Rapids, and they're kind of a new guy on the street. But I'm hoping they're gonna stay out there a while.
There are quite a few craft brewers that come to us direct too, and we'll have pelleted hops for them.
Yeah, we've done a couple of sometimes wet hops before they're even dried. Like Sand Creek has called us before and said, "Hey, bring up 100 pounds of Mount Hoods, and we'll just
Wet.
as soon as they come off the wolf picker, because as soon as they're picked, they're going downhill. If you ain't drying them, they're going to go south. So we put them right in the truck, haul them up there, and drop them off.
That they use them a lot near IPAs, or a wet hop. Jay's
the
got
brewer
one in there. I think that wild red.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You know, if I could just say something, it's interesting what you said about the market and how you only have so many hops and from my end, just being a marketer, I've learned so much here tonight that I didn't know before, but just from marketing end too. When I go into a place, what's new, what's new, what's new? That's all I hear. You know, I can have a great product that we've been doing for 20 some years, but they always want to know what's new, what's the new products out there, and that's what I get. And I can certainly understand what you're talking about there, where everybody's just got the same hops, you're trying to sell them.
We've had times where people will come out after 1 year, they'll come back and say, you know, we can't get enough of this hop, can you guys plant some more of it? And we'll go out and plant it, and the next year when we harvest, the guy will be like, well, them hops are really flat now, we can't sell them. It's like, you can't get ahead of it, you know, if you can only see what people wanted, that'd be the way to go.
How many acres do you have now?
On a 1,200 plant per acre, we're a little over 4 acres. So it's if you said there was 1,000, some people say 1,000 plants, then we're probably at 5 acres. But it's enough. Believe me, we said that's enough. It's right now when we start putting strings up. If we had to string more and we couldn't get the training, we would have problems. You know, we don't have a labor force, and really, we haven't really made any money in hops. It's just something Bob and I enjoy doing. Our wives say they're hop widows. So it's, we're workaholics kind of. He works a full-time job, and I work a full-time job. In the evenings, we watch the sun go down in the hop yard almost every night. So it keeps us out of trouble.
Actually, look forward to rain days.
Yeah. The good thing is when you get into June and all the fertilizer's on, there's a little bit more time between between applications of fungicides and stuff like that, and then fishing season starts.
This lady's got.
Do deer or any other critters destroy your crops?
Deer don't tend to like hops, no. We get a lot of rabbits out there because it's all clover. There's
probably the neatest thing that we've got, and I haven't seen a lot of them, and I'm not really a bird watcher, but we got cedar waxwings like you would not believe.
There's just thousands of cedar waxwings in there if you're a bird lover. And we have found a couple bees nests in there too.
Go ahead. I've got a question. You said you use fungicides. Is there anything else you have to spray on that crop for other types of pests?
Our second year we were in production, we had a tremendous crop. You know, we were coming off the only hop growers probably in the state to make over 100 pounds in their first year. We thought we're going to really show them what's going on the second year. We had the two-spotted spider mite problem, which I'd never seen a two-spotted spider mite before, and we did everything wrong to take care of it. And as a result, the hops, when I was showing you the hops, how green they are from the bottom up, they were brown up until the last 5 feet from the top of the plant before we finally got control of it. And it was a Bayer Chemical guy, the rep that came out and actually said, try this. And he gave us a product called Movento, and we sprayed it on there. He said make 2 applications 5 days apart, and it stopped that bug right in its tracks. But we had tried other things and to no avail. So then the next year, of course, we geared up. We studied up on two-spotted spider mites, and we had a lot of miticides and stuff. And you know, really, we've never seen a year like that again. We're always ready and we're always watching. We have a lot of leafhopper problems. When everybody else gets leafhoppers, we get them, and they tend to suck on the sap of the leaf, and you don't see it right away. But as soon as we see leafhoppers, we go out and spray, because a week or two later, leaves start turning yellow in the hop yard, and you know it was done by that leaf hopper.
Our biggest problem is Japanese beetle.
And now,
We're
Japanese beetles.
harvesting right when they're hitting, so we can't spray nothing to stop them. So
Yeah, so
Does that affect the integrity of the hop
and
itself?
they'll eat the whole cone.
I mean, as far as marketing it, is there a problem with the chemicals at all, or?
No, we have pre-harvest intervals just like every other crop. So anything that we spray, is documented and it's turned into our handler. And there's some products out there you can spray the day before you harvest, and there's other products you can't. You can spray only 2 months before you harvest. And so we tend to use the heavy hitters when we need them, and we have to watch the pre-harvest
the
intervals.
Department of Agriculture is really tough on that. They sample them,
And it's the same with fungicides. There's a pre-harvest interval. We tend to save the short day ones. We rotate every time. We never spray the same product twice in a row, and we try to rotate so that the bugs never get used to it. And
another thing, this is jumping the fence a little bit. Hops were used in the old days when they were taking beer from England and going to Africa, and their beer would spoil before they get there on the ships. And so they started preserving their beer with hops.
that's what I think the original use for hops were. They pack it in kegs to preserve beer. Or hops are a preservative, so they would preserve the beer. But the old sailors like myself got we kind of like that taste. And then
and another modern day use for it now is they're putting it in honeybee nests or whatever hives to stop the mites that the bugs get.
They make a product called Hop Guard, which is the hop resins. It's on a strip that it'd be basically like an organic product you can hang in your beehives to help kill honeybees kill mites during the honey flow, because mites are probably the #1 killer of honeybees. No matter what you hear, that's what it is. If you can get rid of the mites, I think our honeybees would live through the winter. There's Bob's sunflowers. When we had the wedding, we planted a big bunch of sunflowers, and now it's kind of got to be an annual thing. So we just throw a bag of sunflower seeds out there and let them grow, and it's beside the hop yard. So it's this is the trash pile. Someone said, "What happens to that hops?" That pile can be 8 feet deep, and it's just little shreds of hop plant.
That's the string and all.
So what do you do with that?
We let it cook. We let it cook for a while because it gets really hot. And then we put it in a manure spreader and spread it back out.
We've got a couple guys that come and pick it up with their wagon, and they mix it with oak leaves, and they say within 3 weeks the oak leaves are completely gone. It's that hot.
That's the binding as it comes out of the wolf picker. Remember how they look lush and full of hops? That's how much is left when it comes out and drops into the chopper. That's what's actually going out in that pile. And we originally had our hop yard anchored with poles in the ground like that. And as the hops would get heavier and heavier and heavier, sometimes they pop right out of the ground. And some of them are 6 or 8 feet long telephone, or they were railroad ties in the ground. A couple of them are telephone poles.
One of the things, storms are really tough when you get that. When you get a good summer thunderstorm, you can imagine where all
sideways, but that's a
pole that got busted.
This last summer we had one of them 5-inch rain days and a heavy wind, and it snapped off a corner post. And
it's a 6x6.
Sorry that it's not oriented right, but you can see the hops here are almost on the ground. From 20 feet up, they're down on the ground. And there's Bob fixing the pole. I had to work that day, so he had to do that solo. But he's out there trying to figure out how to fix the pole, get the hops back up. Leaving them on the ground, the downy mildew would take over instantly. This is an aerial view of our hop yard. My nephew had a drone. I'd never messed with one of them, but he sent it up in the air and took it, and you can see across the way as the neighbor's cranberry marsh right across the road. That used to be my grandfather's farm. But so that's what ours. I don't know if that looks like the Sparta picture or not, but there's our equivalent. There's another blurry picture of it. And there's sunset on the hop yard. We seem to always see that. And then this is what it looks like now. After, I told you we cut the hops off at 5 feet, and then we let them stay till fall. And then when everybody else is thinking it's time to get ready for deer season, Bob and I are out there cutting them off at the ground and hauling all the trash back out, so they're cut off in the end right at the ground level after they freeze.
Is that done manually?
It's done manually. We have a steel edge trimmer that we try to do it with, but
In the spring, when they first come up and you said you cut them off, you have to do that manually?
if we're gonna harvest the shoots, we go out with the scissors and cut them off and put them on a piece of cardboard, and then our wives put a rubber band on like you would asparagus. But if
All on your hands and knees?
a lot of it is done on our hands and knees. This is the most labor-intensive thing I've ever done in my life.
Would it work to lay on a wagon and roll yourself around?
I don't know if it would. We usually turn on the music, and we just go to work. Well, I also have, it's like a, I don't know, it's probably like a 15-second video of the wolf picker operating. If you want, you can put that up, and I'll show it to you. I wish I would have took more, but it was just something I shot. And then I thought, well, I should bring that over and just let you show you. It'll show you the vine going through and the hops coming out, but I don't really show anything else, but it's a couple seconds. And that's what it would look like if you put the vine on. The machine takes it, and then we're beautiful hops there.
We're not photographers.
Yeah. And then there's any brown cones that come out, they're trying to get them out of there, and then this is the bins at the back side. And we have the discharge, you can see just the hops just keep on coming. After a couple hours of staring at that belt, they get a little testy.
What happens is it looks like the belt stops and the sides of the elevator are moving.
A little dizzy from watching all that.
When I first got here, I seen up here there's a wash tub, and it said a guy gave this to his wife in 1910 for a wedding present. And I thought, I don't think my wife would go for that. I let her pick hops.
All right, sir.
All right, sir.
All right, let's give these guys a round of applause. So much information. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to get the lights up, and Jay is here from Sand Creek Brewery. Jay, was there anything you wanted to say before you start offering samples of some beer you brought today?
No, other than I've got probably 6 different kinds. I've got anything from a light, I hate to use the L word in craft, but we got something on the lighter side. And we've got an IPA, which those guys mentioned. I got a good stout. Many of you probably are familiar with our products, but I got a little bit of everything, so yeah.
Okay, wonderful. We're going to turn the lights on, and then we're just going to clear out some of the chairs right here. Just going to put them up against the barn, just fold them up, put them against the barn, and then stick around. We have some other refreshments that'll be up on the counter. We'll have some juice and some cookies, and these guys will hang out for a while to answer any other questions you have. Thank you again for coming tonight.